Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or the short version, ADHD. We first have to see what attention deficit or ADHD. We first want to see what ADHD or attention deficit means. Attention deficit is a disorder that usually affects you when you're young. A lot of people think that ADHD is only found in children, but that's not the case because you can be grown and you could still have this disorder. But it's seen more in children and teenagers. The main problem with ADHD is that the person suffering from it cannot focus on one thing and they lose track of what they're doing. People that have ADHD can't stand still, and when they're sitting down, they always want to get up and move around. And you could sense a nervousness inside them. And also, a lot of them like to talk nonstop. There are a lot of people that have no patience and they want to get up and go and they get irritated when it doesn't happen. That does not mean you have ADHD. You're just impatient. Only a doctor can diagnose someone with ADHD because they have to ask certain questions in order to understand if they suffer from this disorder or not. One of the most important things they ask is that what that person was experiencing before the age of 12. Was this disorder putting a negative effect in your life at the age of 12 or before? Doctors believe if someone has ADHD, it has to put a negative effect on their life, relationships, schoolwork, and their life as a whole. Doctors recognize 3 different types of ADHD. There's one version where the body doesn't suffer from this disorder, but the mind does, and they can't really focus on one thing, or they focus on something extremely hard. We have another one where the mind is very calm, but the body can't stand still, and they keep moving around. And the worst of all, they suffer from both of them. Their body and mind cannot stand still. Kids that suffer from this have a very hard time learning new stuff, and that's all because they have a hard time focusing on something. You can't cure ADHD, but you can treat it. Of course, there are different pills, but that's not the first fix. One of the best things a person can do is practice. Basically, practice controlling your thoughts and not getting distracted easily. The better you get at this, the better you can focus on one thing. ADHD can be a positive thing as well because there are a lot of successful people that give credit to their ADHD for them being so successful. But the main thing is that they wanted to control it and they didn't allow this disorder to control their mind and life. But this is different for children. It will be much easier to teach a child to control their disorder from a very young age. What is the history of ADHD anyways? The term ADHD is very new and it began in the 1980s. But a disorder like this has been found since the year 1798, where doctors back then have written that someone suffers like this, but they didn't really know what is causing it. But recently they found out that it's a mental disorder. Some may mistake OCD with ADHD. When someone that has ADHD where they forget their keys, they forgot if they locked the doors or not. This doesn't mean that they actually suffer from ADHD. With 2-3 mistakes, you can't really say that you have a disorder. But when it happens all the time and it puts a negative effect in your entire life, that's when you know it's an actual disorder and it's a problem. That's when you can officially say that this is ADHD. Just like we said in the beginning of the video, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. But doctors say this terminology is actually incorrect because the attention deficit part is actually wrong. Back in the day, they thought attention deficit had a lot to do with this disorder, but they realized that people with this disorder have a lot of attention. Actually, too much attention. They focus on something so hard that it's extremely hard for them to not focus on it and pay attention to something else. So the term attention deficit is kind of wrong, and you should call this disorder a hyperactivity disorder. When a normal person focuses on something, they can turn the volume up and down from 1 to 10, and based on whatever they're listening to, they can go up and down. Like in class, you could go all the way up and listen closely, but when your wife is speaking, you can turn it all the way down because who cares? But that was a joke. But when someone has ADHD, their attention volume is random or all the way up, and adjusting this volume is extremely difficult. Like for example, someone with this disorder wants to do something like take out the trash, but when they're walking, they get distracted by a spider, and their whole focus shifts to this spider, and they completely forget what they wanted to do in the first place. We want to give you an interesting example on how the mind works. Imagine their brain is a CEO of a huge company, and the CEO, meaning the brain, is in the meeting room and he's doing something. The assistant of this CEO, which is another part of the brain, is told to not let anyone in, but the assistant lets everybody in, or it lets nobody in. The short-term memory of the brain, which is basically the RAM of the computer, is weakened when you have this disorder, and it's extremely hard to remember little things in a short period of time. That is why they say if you don't learn something easily, write it down, because when you write it down, you could remember it much easier. Do you guys know the mouse wheel where they just run non-stop and it never ends? This is basically the brain of someone that has ADHD. It never stops spinning because there's no brakes on it. When your brain and thoughts are running this fast, it basically exhausts your entire body. Some people with ADHD say your brain is like a pinball in a pinball machine because it never stops moving and just relax for a minute. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell, someone that has been studying ADHD for years, and they're considered an expert in this field. Dr. Hallowell gives an amazing example. He says a person suffering from ADHD, their brain is like a Formula 1 car where it's extremely fast and high performance. But the brakes on this Formula 1 car is from a bicycle. Dr. Hallowell continues and says, you can adjust the brakes on this car and do something where you have an extremely high performance brain where you can have complete control over it. At that point, your mind can do great things. Just like the people we said earlier where they thanks their ADHD for their success. So how does a person get ADHD in the first place? A lot of doctors say it mostly comes from genetic, and there is a chance you could get ADHD with brain damage. Most doctors try to solve this issue by practicing and not giving medications. In a lot of countries, there are actually classes for kids that have ADHD where they can practice their mind to defeat this disorder. They basically teach children to accept these thoughts and not let it negatively affect your life. This is great for kids because they can learn easier, but when you get older, it becomes more difficult, and you might need medication to help you make it easier. There's a low percentage of children that need medications as well. Like for example, in the US, 6% of kids are on ADHD medication. The rest of them go to class to learn how to control this disorder and basically defeat it. Doctors say if you're older and you have ADHD, the best thing you can do is eat healthy and work out a ton, because these two are your best friend and they help you have a clearer mindset. Eating something healthy could be eggs. You don't have to eat vegetables and salads all day. Doing these two tasks help you calm your nerves and have a better mindset. This advice was given by the NIH, or National Institutes of Health. NIH continues and says, if attention deficit hyperactivity disorder puts a negative effect on your life, one of the best things you could do or try out is some medication, because when you have a hard time accepting this disorder, the medication might help you accept it faster or easier. But you should know that you should only take medication if it's putting a negative effect on your life and you have no other options in terms of fixing it. Back in the day, these medications were given to children and people left and right without any questions. But nowadays, they try to fix it with teaching rather than meds, especially for children and teenagers. I wish you all the very best, and I hope this video helped you out.